We're at Art Basel Miami. We're presenting a new project called Scout. So Matt and I are really interested in this idea of novelty search. A lot of people, when they talk about AI, they think that it's just kind of a regurgitation or a remix of what's in the data set. And that's true in some cases, but there's also this opportunity if we allow an AI to just kind of wander and try to find interesting parts of latent space, then you can actually find something novel. So that's this thing called novelty search.
The images that you see on screen are, one, a recording, kind of game style, God's eye view of the developers on their hunt in the mountain range. And then you'll see images that were filmed and recorded from cameras on their head, above their head, sometimes cameras that they hold. That are then shared with the AI agents. And then over time, you'll start to see the agents mutate and produce their own images, as well as a UMAP kind of embedding cluster, it's called, which basically shows you where the new images being created fall in relation to other images that have been created. So ostensibly what's happening is the agents are themselves building their own map or wilderness or terrain or latent space that they're navigating to try and see what's next, to see where they can go and where they can take this line of reasoning.
This is actually completely serendipitous because we had already named this project Scout on behalf of this movement from the 1800s. And then we were talking to our developers and they were like, okay, well, we're going to be gone from this period of time because we're going on a hike. And we were like, okay, well, where are you going on a hike? And they were like, oh, we're going to the UK. Okay, where in the UK? To Scout. And so that was just this kind of serendipitous moment where we're like, okay, well, if you're going hiking at Scout, we need to hook you up with all kinds of cameras so that you can actually go on the hike with the agents that we were already developing at the time. So this is a really interesting way to have a kind of human input along with agentic input to try to find really the most novel imagery that we can in latent space.
We're definitely using some video game language, particularly with the overhead shot. A couple of people have remarked that the developers themselves look almost like a game player. And it's kind of true, they're playing a game as well as the agents. And if you were to create an analogy, novelty search is in a sense a little bit more like open-ended game environments, where rather than simply kind of aiming for a target, having a specific mission and completing that objective, you're just kind of navigating the world trying to find something new.
So we were really inspired by this idea of the right to roam, which was a movement in the late 1800s in the UK. There's a location that memorializes this called Scout, and that's the name of this project, where people met together. They held a protest for this right to be able to roam across privately owned land. This idea that humans should have the right to go hiking and to be able to experience nature and just to simply roam.
And the principle of novelty search is something that was developed, by a few people, but kind of chief amongst them, a researcher called Dr. Ken Stanley and Joel Lehman. The genesis of the idea is they were looking at different, let's say, remarkable humans that produced remarkable things. And they came to the conclusion that when you ask a scientist who discovers something novel in science, or an artist who comes to an amazing idea, and you ask them how they got there, the answer is almost always they don't know how they got there, they just followed their gut. In taking this teaching over to the realm of machine learning, the question that they ask, which I think is a very relevant question, is why are we training machines to over-optimize to produce certain goals? Why rather are we not producing machines to follow intuition in the same way that humans do? We're particularly interested in this idea because it reconciles in some ways the goals of machine learning research with ultimately the goals of art, right? Because the ultimate fundamental alibi, at least for, let's say, 20th century contemporary art, is the idea that we institutions and artists produce spaces for free exploration. Without knowing exactly what the outcome is going to be, artists are encouraged to follow their gut, train themselves by all means, but then use all their tools to move into unknown territory and just see what happens. And that's where you really, it's the process of doing that is the actual process of art making. And that's where all the interesting stuff comes from, is when you start a process and don't really know where it ends.
So in the background video, you can actually see the machine learning devs hiking through Scout. That's a video, a high-res video that they're shooting when they went on the hike. And then as an overlay, you can see the agents who are kind of in dialogue with one another, arguing and trying to find the most kind of novel imagery that they can create. And you'll see that kind of switching back and forth throughout the interface.
A lot of people have a lot of preconceived notions about what it is to work with machine learning in art. We've been doing it for well over a decade. The closest thing we can come to is we kind of coined this term of protocol art, where you say, okay, well, when you're working with a machine, you now have all these different tools to build systems of rules or protocols to allow for media to emerge out of. That's actually the magic of working with machine learning as a practice, more so than the rather tedious task of saying, oh yeah, like, you know, I want a picture of a cat in a, that's fine, but is a rather kind of mundane question for art. More interesting for art is saying, okay, well, we now have these new kind of degrees of freedom that we can use to express ourselves. How would you build a rule set, or how would you build a protocol to create an open-ended project that has outcomes that you couldn't have anticipated? That's kind of the opportunity working with machine learning, more so than kind of recreating painting styles or whatever it is that people are worried about.
So one thing that me and Matt have been working on for several years now is building data sets in the public domain. We care a lot about having large-scale data sets that anyone can kind of experiment with, so that we have a really wide population experimenting with machine learning. So we do this in the audio realm by holding singing ceremonies where people can sing, and then all of that audio is then gifted to the public domain so people can do machine learning training on that material. But we also do that in the image space. We put together PD40M, which is the largest data set of public domain images that exists. And a lot of machine learning developers are using those images to create fully public domain base layer models that then anyone can use, knowing that their data sources are fully clean.